We're in a new era. How are you feeling? The certification has gone off without a hitch. Noticeably, there was no insurrection. We have seen the peaceful transfer of power into the new hands of the next administration, or at least the as it pertains to the House and the Senate. How are you as a member of Congress feeling, and what are you and your colleagues planning to do in order to continue representing the interests of your communities and your constituents?
Yesterday was really tough for me.
Yeah.
And even listening to that audio was tough. And I tell people all the time that the vice president is such a better person than I am,
Girl.
because she does it all with grace. And, that viral clip came out yesterday as well, after she had sworn in the senator,
Hmm.
and the disrespect and the spitting in her face. And people try to tell us that there is no racism. They try to tell us that there is no sexism. And they try to tell us all kinds of other reasons as to why, quote unquote, she lost. Well, let
Mm.
me tell you something. The country is the one that lost. We lost out on the ability to have decency, to have someone who's respectful, to have someone who is graceful, to have someone who actually respects our Constitution. We are the ones that lost, because let me tell you, there is no losing when your name is Kamala D. Harris. She
Mm.
is nothing but a winner. And so to sit up there, like literally, I was just sitting in the chamber, and I was sitting in the very back away from all cameras, because I did not know if I was going to be able to hold it together. And I did, outwardly. But when you looked at some of my colleagues, like they were boohooing, it was just like we had just had this wound that had started to heal in some way, and then it was ripped apart again, because our colleagues on the other side, they definitely aren't graceful in any way. And you could just look at their faces and how they were acting towards her.
Yeah.
And she did her job. And honestly, that's what America is used to Black women doing, is
Always.
we are always the bigger people. We are always the ones holding it down.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for me, you know what? It was about 2 days after the election when the vice president called me and said, "Take your time, but the country is looking to you to be one of those stars that I talked about in
Mm.
my concession speech." And
Mm.
so she was just like, "You still got work to do."
Wow. I got to be honest with you. It has been. I'm not usually emotional about politics, and I've never been sort of a stand for any particular politician. I went into a time of mourning, however, Representative Crockett afterwards, and not necessarily because. And it's weird to see people online. Oh, they're a shill for this, that, and the other. I get not one red, black, nor green cent from any political party. Like, so I have
Yeah.
the ability to be independent in the way I approach things. But there was a sense of mourning that I know I experienced, and I'm curious as to how you would respond to this because of the vision of the future that she was trying to create, where she was trying to drag this country where she was trying to drag us was going to be for the betterment of so many people. And it felt like a real, and it continues to. And this was reaffirmed for me yesterday as well, though not nearly to the same degree that I'm sure it was for you, being present in there and knowing intimately what it is that we're going to be facing from the political arena. But a real sense of loss of a potential future that would have placed us in a more equitable environment. Would not have been perfect. We still would have been in this country. We still would have had the challenges. But it seems as though when you say we lost, the nation lost, that feels like a palpable loss for me. I'm curious as to how you are managing the very important role of envisioning what can come next in spite of the losses and in spite of what the incoming administration has planned. How are you and your colleagues considering what the next round of the fight looks like? Because when she talked about those billions of stars, I was like, I am going to be a star, Madam Vice President. What does that look like for you and the colleagues who you're working alongside with?
The phoenix rises in the ashes. And so, I absolutely believe not only will we have stars, but we will have so many phoenixes that will pop up. And even the fact that my name, or potentially anybody else that's listening knows my name, it actually was forged in the fire, right? Like, it's not that everything was going normally. Like, I was put on the defensive, and that is when people were able to see me shine. And so we are going to be on the defensive. And honestly, I don't have a vision. All I have right now is a matter of you know what? We about to block as much as we can.
Mm.
And, there are people that say, well, why won't you work with the Republicans? The Republicans can't work with themselves. Like, I don't know what it is that y'all trying to get me to do, but like, they don't like each other. So what am I
Mm.
supposed to do with that? Right? Like, we know that there is nothing that Donald Trump said that is good for people that look like me,
Right.
whether it means you're a woman or whether it means you're black. That is why when we looked at the numbers, black women did their part. We are the 93%. But
Right.
when we looked at other women, I was like, what y'all doing? Now, listen, I'm going to give a shout out to my Latina sisters because they were holding it down to the best of their ability. And we know that our Jewish brothers and sisters
Yeah.
actually held it down to a
So
decent
did.
percentage. But when we started talking about our white sisters, listen, IVF, I mean, that's something that I
Ivy
believe
went.
when
IVF
correct,
went.
correct. When we look at the numbers and we look at the demographics, this is not something that black and brown women are typically taking advantage of in the numbers that our Caucasian sisters are. But we know that when it comes to abortion access, and that's why I appreciate my white women in Texas. Let me be clear,
Mm.
because it was white women that decided to be on the forefront of the fight for abortion access because they knew that they had a privilege that some other women didn't.
Wow.
And they took that privilege and they said, listen, I'm going to put my business out on Front Street and try to
Mm.
get this handled in the courts. But ultimately, when the courts failed them, they knew that they had the ability to leave the state of Texas and to still save their lives. And they did. So I will not say all white women because I would never do a paintbrush like that. But we know that the numbers were way too skewed when
Mm.
it came to white women versus looking at other women. And so when we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, those policies have most benefited white women.
Right.
I mean, the face of it for the Republicans have been black and brown and every other color that you can think of, but it's white women
Mm.
that benefited the most. And so I believe that we are in the find out phase of things. And I'm just going to do my part to basically make sure that I honor the oath that I took as it relates to the people that sent me here.
Right.
Because when I think of a mandate, I think of the fact that of all challenged Republicans or Democrats returning to Congress, I had
Mm.
the best numbers in the entire state of Texas. That
Mm.
means I have a mandate from my district to continue to fight as hard as I can and to make sure that I honor who it is that they are, where 20% of my district live at or below poverty, where we are still fighting for the funding that we need for public education, where we are still going to honor and protect those that are in need of Social Security, their veterans benefits, as well as everything else that the federal government has to offer. So I am going to, hope that the Republicans be who they've been, which they've been dysfunctional in the majority.
Yeah, and we've
Mm,
seen that up close and personal. The
yeah.
dysfunction, they haven't even gotten to the swearing in and or the inauguration, and the dysfunction is already on display. We saw that with the debt ceiling, or rather, we should say with the continuing resolution,
Yep.
and then the request or the demand from 45, 47 that there be a debt ceiling increase, which we understood to be a demand that would allow him to be able to provide those tax cuts and make them permanent, those that are
Right.
supposed to expire in 2025. We also know that their dysfunction is not only going to be on display because of their own infighting and bickering, but the majority that they have is razor thin, and I believe
Yep.
heading to being even potentially slimmer. And so the role of opposition, I love that you said on the defense is where you shine, because we're going to have an opportunity to see a lot of that. The margins are so slim. Do you really see a way for Mike Johnson, who, as I understand it, historically is one of the least experienced speakers of the House? We know Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, my congressman, is just waiting in the wings, waiting in the wings.
Yeah.
But with a majority this slim, and while there is this repeated statement that they have a mandate, the numbers just simply don't bear that out. Barely won anything in terms of exceeding expectations for the popular vote. And yes, the Electoral College was there, but considering a third of the nation stayed home, there really is no basis for claiming that there is a mandate for the Project 2025 reality that they're going to implement. I have been kikiing and minding my business, as the song says, you drink water and mind your business.
Hmm.
And because the FAFO era is here, having said that, however, We all know our communities are going to get caught up in the FAFO, and we want to minimize the harm to anyone who was not a willing participant in this at the very least. But the reality is, with this level of majority, slim as it is, the lacking of a mandate, the inability for them to be effective, 2026 is right around the corner. I know this is going to sound crazy, Representative Crockett, but I low key feel very optimistic about our ability as a nation to take advantage of all the inefficiencies that this party is going to bring to the bear or bring to
No,
bear.
I think you've properly assessed it. The best thing that we have is, yes, they ended up picking up more seats in the Senate, and yes, they ended up with the White House, but they ended up with a slimmer majority. And in fact, they snatched the speakership from Hakeem Jeffries, as far as I'm concerned,
Mm,
because of the Republican-controlled Supreme Court in North Carolina. They actually gerrymandered. They went back, they redrew the lines, and they stole 3 seats.
mm,
Listen, we know that North Carolina voted for Trump as it relates to the presidency, and that
right,
was a little bit over 50% that he got. But they ended up voting for a Democratic governor. They ended up voting for a Democratic AG. They ended up voting for a Democratic lieutenant governor. So what that tells you is that the state of North Carolina is pretty much evenly split.
right,
Well, in the 118th, they had 7 members of Congress that were Democrats, 7 members of Congress that were Republicans. That's pretty much reflective of the will of the people of
right.
North Carolina, because they're evenly split. Well, going into the 119th, what they have instead is they have picked up 4 Republican seats. So now, instead of having 7, they now have 11. And instead of the Dems having 7, they now have 3.
And
11 to 3.
that
And that
sounds like
is
gerrymandering, redistricting,
that is
redistricting.
absolutely gerrymandering. And
Mm,
but for them doing that, if we would have had proper representation, which is basically a 50-50 split, considering the vote outcome that we saw, that would have been 3 seats. The Democrats right now have
wow.
215. We would have had 218. So we were able to still pick up 2 seats, but we technically should have picked up a total of 5 seats, making Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker of the House with the slimmest majority for
Mm,
sure. But we know that Democrats know how to govern. And so, with them having ultimately what it's going to turn out to be 217 to 215, this means that they can only lose 1 vote,
right.
because actually they can't lose 1 vote.
Because
My,
that's
my
it.
bad. Because
Right.
then that would actually make it tied. They can't
Mm,
lose any votes, because a tie means it doesn't pass. That means they've got to be perfect. And we know that there is nothing perfect on walking on this earth. And definitely we know that a Republican majority is not perfect in the House. And so, yeah, they're going to need to work with Hakeem Jeffries if they want to get anything done. But every time he threatens to work with the Democrats, well, ultimately they end up threatening to kick him out. So
right.
we're just going to see. But I think I think our unity is absolutely our strength. So long as Democrats hold the line, there's a lot of this quote unquote agenda that just will not get accomplished.
Right. And thank God for that. And I know we're going to be doing our effort to make sure that the people are organized and doing what we're supposed to do, because this is democracy is a participation sport, full participation sport, folks. Representative Crockett, I want to come back to this gerrymandered redistricting effort that successfully snatched those seats in the state of California. We've seen similar redistricting manipulation in a variety of states. And I know this is something that you've talked about. Y'all, we ain't gonna nerd out and wonk out on this, but y'all know the law center I lead, we represent communities of African heritage in redistricting efforts here in the state of New York. Shout out to the Center for Law and Social Justice, Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and Latino Justice Pearl Jeff. Our coalition allows for us to have each of the significant Voting Rights Act protected minority groups participate in the redistricting process so that there is an equitable distribution of political power. You have recently spoken in a variety of hearings about the way in which you have seen similar redistricting efforts not inure to the benefit of the communities that are driving population increases. And you suggested, or you talked about the fact that you'd seen this even in the great state of Texas. Give us a sense as to what is happening in these states where we are seeing Black communities, Latino communities, Asian communities driving population growth and expansion, but the benefit of that growth and expansion in population vis-a-vis census counts is being redirected to the communities that are losing population, that being in many of these states white communities, but it's the white communities that seem to be getting the benefits of the increased resource allocation that comes with population growth. Can you talk to us a little bit? I know we just have just a minute or two left, but it's such an important point because in 2 years we're at 2026. And I've started doing census preparation in the sevens. So we don't wait until census to get ready. Give us a sense as to what we need to be aware of when it comes to voter dilution and political gerrymandering, and the ability for both of those things to work together to remove the benefits that our communities, all of our communities, should be experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. As you're talking about the census, I just want to make sure I put in my plug because I know specifically in minority communities, we definitely don't want the government in our lives at all. Listen, y'all, I don't even use my government issued cell phone. Okay, as the federal government, I'm like, I don't trust y'all like that. So like, I don't even use like my work cell phone. So I completely get it, right? But at the same time, this is how we get resources. Whether we're talking about making sure that we have adequate roads, whether we're talking about our hospitals, whether we're talking about our schools. So make sure you participate in the census. This is literally just a count. So, I mean, if you got ticket warrants or anything like that, it ain't about that. So I just want to make sure, please, please, please participate because there's always an undercount when it comes to communities of color, which means that we get less than we deserve in general. So every time we're looking around and we're saying we're not getting our part, it's because we're not being counted. Well, part of it. The other part is that we don't have the representation that we need that is reflective of our community. So what I talked about in a recent hearing, and we don't have any hearings just yet because I still don't have my committee hearings, but nevertheless, one of the things that I talked about is that the fact that the state of Texas is a majority minority state, that theoretically means that minorities should be putting more people into seats to go to Congress. Now, does that mean that they're going to necessarily elect minorities? Absolutely not. But they are supposed to be the ones that have the voices that overwhelmingly get to decide. So my district is a majority minority district, and they have historically decided to elect 2 Black women because it's only been 2 of us since the seat was created about 34 years ago now. Okay. So what happened is the state of Texas was able to pick up 2 new seats. The state of New York lost a seat, and I believe the state of California lost a seat because of the population redistribution. All right. So we picked up 2 new seats in the state of Texas. We grew the state of Texas by 4 million people. The state of Texas currently sits at approximately 30 million people as it relates to the population. Of those 4 million people that we added, 180,000 were Anglos. So that means everybody else was Black, brown, or Asian. All right. Do you think that of those 2 seats that we got, they created 2 new seats that belong to either the Black, brown, Asian, or some coalition that was able to decide who it is that they would send to DC? They did not. Instead, they created 2 new Anglo seats. Now get this. Now I'm giving y'all the numbers. We only added 180,000 Anglos. And let me tell you, there was an undercount of Black, brown, and Asian, most likely, when we look at the rest of the 4 million people. But not only did they decide to do, we're going to create 2 new Anglo seats, our congressional seats are 766,000 people. So how you make the math work, I don't really know, except for the fact that you say, you know what? Let me cut up this representation of the Black folk over here, or the brown folk over here, or let me divide out the Asian folk over here so that we can recreate this so that now Anglos have the vast majority of the voices that we send for these 2 new seats. It's not right.
They don't have the population to sustain
They don't have the population. And I just talked about North Carolina and what they did and how they diluted their voices. Listen, let me make it very plain. We have 30, wait a minute. We have 38 total seats in the state of Texas that go to Congress. They go to the House at least. We have 38, and then we have 2 senators, which is how we get 40 total when it comes to the Electoral College. 38 from the House and 2 from the Senate. All right. So of those 38 voices, about 13 of them are Democrats. Well, 13 divided by 38, I'm not really sure what that is. But I can tell you it's not 50%. But when you look at it, Donald Trump only got like 54% of the vote. So they're not giving us our representation when it comes to political representation, nor are they giving us our representation when it comes to our cultural background.
Wow.
That is why we need a real Supreme Court. That is why we need real leaders in the US House as well as the US Senate, and frankly, on the state level, because we are missing out on the Voting Rights Act. We are back to the 1950s, and we right now have a Voting Rights Act that has been depleted, yet we have the legislation and we can't get it passed.
Right. And we're looking at a rise in state voting rights act. I was so proud to be a part of the effort here in New York State to get a New York State Voting Rights Act passed, but that is now facing litigation, as are so many of the programs that are dedicated to remedying the harms that a race-based discrimination, systematic race-based discrimination, has inflicted on our communities. Representative Crockett, we y'all are going to have your hands full, and we
Yeah.
the people are as well, and we want you to know that as you said, you became to know your name as you were going through the fire, because on the defense is where you were able to shine. Well, we look forward to not only seeing that shine, but to helping to sustain it, to support it, to adding our light as we all pick up our responsibility, bring our brick. It's a phrase we use here in Urban View. Bring our brick to build what it is going to require for our communities to thrive. We all plan on being a part of those billions of stars right alongside with you, and we are just grateful for you and folks like yourself who are doing this work.